Welcome to the Formula Bone F1 Show's 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix recap. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. Let's get into it, folks. J-Bone! First up, on my Hungarian Grand Prix preview episode, I gave you 4 storylines to follow throughout the race weekend. Let's see how those shaped up. The first storyline was, will Lewis Hamilton become the first driver to ever record 9 wins at the same Grand Prix? And he did not, but he did come close by getting P2, with Max Verstappen, of course, getting P1. Lewis and Mercedes boss Toto Wolff both stated after the Hungarian Grand Prix that if it weren't for the DRS issue that caused Lewis to not get a final lap time in at the end of qualifying on Saturday, Lewis very well could have won the race. And I fully believe them, because Lewis's car was clearly capable of qualifying on the front row, if not on pole, if that DRS had worked properly. And I say this considering his teammate was on pole, and they're even cars. And I also say this because Lewis registered the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. Pretty good sign that your car's fast. And also because Lewis finished the race 7.8 seconds behind Max, a time gap that I believe is small enough to have been easily erased and then some had Lewis started on the front row rather than in P7, where he started because of that DRS issue. However, of course, Lewis's DRS did malfunction, and Max did win the race quite handily, I should add. But if you're a Mercedes fan, you have to be feeling pretty confident right now that 1, you'll have at least 1 race win this season, and 2, you will almost certainly finish ahead of Ferrari in the World Constructors' Championship this season. Would never have imagined me saying that after the first couple races, but here we are, folks. Here we are. The second storyline was, does the Hungaroring better suit Red Bull or Ferrari? And honestly, it's hard to say. Because even though Max Verstappen won the race over the nearest Ferrari by a full 14.5 seconds, Ferrari's strategy was so bad this race that I'm still convinced they could have won if they weren't so wildly incompetent in the strategy and pit stop departments. I'll talk more about the whole Leclerc hard tire situation later on this episode when I am forced to make excuses for why I was wrong when I predicted Leclerc to win the Grand Prix. But right now, I want to point out that Ferrari, in my opinion, messed up the Hungarian Grand Prix before it even began by not splitting tire strategies between their 2 drivers. The starting grid was split right down the middle when it came to first tire stint strategy, with 10 drivers starting on mediums and 10 drivers starting on softs. George Russell, in pole position, was starting on softs, and considering the Ferraris in P2 and P3 right behind him knew they had the race pace advantage over George, it makes 0 sense to me that they wouldn't put the softs on Sainz in P2 to match George and then the mediums on Leclerc in P3 so they could have both strategies covered. There's clearly 2 strategies that might work. Why not try both? This would have given Sainz a decent chance of catching Russell during their first tire stints because they would be on even tires and Sainz's car is faster. And if Sainz was not able to catch George either due to a bad start or a lockup or something, it would be fine because then Sainz would be able to go for the undercut at this very undercut-friendly circuit. All the while, Leclerc would be there to go for the overcut if it turned out the medium was the better starting tire. Ferrari had the chance to try out both the overcut and the undercut on a car they knew was slower than theirs. And they didn't do it. Wild. Splitting first tire stint strategies also would have made it so that if it came down to it, Ferrari could have used Sainz to cover off Max by putting on medium tires rather than force Leclerc onto the awful hard tires to cover Max off. So I have no clue why Ferrari didn't do it. I would love to read your thoughts on this opinion of mine that the Ferrari should have split tire strategies in the YouTube comment section of this episode. So go leave those comments there, folks. The third storyline was Haas are finally bringing an upgrade package to the Hungarian Grand Prix. While the Haas upgrade package didn't immediately propel K-Mag into pole sitter and race winner like all of us Haas delusion syndrome sufferers thought it would, let's just all remember to trust the process. Hop on board the Steiner ship, trust what Haas are doing. It can take a little bit of time to work out the kinks when it comes to upgrades. So let's all just sit back, relax, let King Gunther work it all out, and then prepare for K-Mag to be pole sitter and race winner at the next race, the Belgian Grand Prix. No Haas delusion syndrome, just vibes. The final storyline was, what will the World Drivers' Championship and World Constructors' Championship title fights look like going into the F1 summer break? Here is what the driver and constructor title fights look like heading into the 3-week-long F1 summer break after the Hungarian Grand Prix results. Entering the F1 summer break, Max Verstappen sits in first place in the World Drivers' Championship by a huge margin of 80 points. Let me put this lead in perspective for you. It's currently the beginning of August, and amazingly, Max's lead in the World Drivers' Championship is so massive right now that it means he could literally take a 2-month vacation and not race again until the Singapore Grand Prix on October 2nd, and still be leading the World Drivers' Championship even if Charles Leclerc wins every race and gets every fastest lap point between now and then. Unbelievable. Max has such a big lead right now. If, again, after the Australian Grand Prix, imagine saying that Max would be going into the summer break with an 80-point lead. Crazy. What a wild season this has been. Charles Leclerc sits behind Max in second, just 5 points ahead of Checo in third, and just 15 points behind Checo sits George Russell, who has officially leapfrogged Carlos Sainz in P5 to take solo P4 in the World Drivers' Championship. Again, imagine saying that early in the season. I mean, George obviously has been incredibly consistent, all top 5 finishes minus his one DNF at the British Grand Prix, but man, this first half of the season has just been insane. Entering the F1 summer break, Red Bull lead the World Constructors' Championship with a commanding 97-point lead over Ferrari in P2. And just 30 points behind Ferrari now sit Mercedes in P3. Mercedes look very, very much like they're going to pass Ferrari not long after the summer break, unless Ferrari get their act together, which seems to be asking quite a lot of them, to be honest. And as far as best of the rest goes, Alpine have a 4-point lead over McLaren, who really need Danny Rick to up his game if they want to finish the season P4 in the World Constructors' Championship. It is now time to check in with you all regarding how my 3 bona fide race predictions fared at the Hungarian Grand Prix. My first race prediction was that Charles Leclerc would win the Hungarian Grand Prix. And I was feeling pretty confident about this one because, Leclerc flew past George Russell to take the lead. He was looking fast until Ferrari inexplicably decided to pit Leclerc early to cover off Max's second pit stop and put the terrible hard tires on Leclerc's car, which ruined his race and led to him finishing P6. At the point in the race at which Ferrari decided to pit Leclerc, they pretty much forced themselves to put on the hard tires because A, they couldn't put on the mediums without making an additional pit stop because you have to use 2 different tire compounds during a race, and Leclerc had only used the mediums up to that point. He went medium after his first pit stop. And B, they couldn't put on the softs without making an additional pit stop because they wouldn't last until the end of the race. There were too many laps left to finish the race on the softs. So they forced themselves onto the hards. And here's the thing. This is all pretty ironic because the hard tires they put on Leclerc's car were so bad and were ruining his race so much that he made an additional pit stop anyways later in the race to put on the soft tires for damage limitation purposes. Ferrari claim that in their simulations, the hard tires were supposed to be much better than they ended up being, which is why they decided to put them on Leclerc's car. But instead of trusting their speculative simulations, they should have just looked at the real-life data of Alpine and Haas struggling badly on the hard tires during the race and decided, wow, these things kind of suck. Let's avoid them and not be overreactionary buffoons by just leaving Leclerc out on his mediums until we can put the softs on like we're doing with Carlos. Underreactionary in Monaco, overreactionary in Hungary, Ferrari's strategy is just an absolute mess this season. And it is ruining Charles Leclerc's title chances. I'm not saying it's over because it's never over till it's over. Well, I should say it's never over till it's mathematically impossible, but certainly mathematically improbable right now for Leclerc to win. The Red Bull would have to have some insane reliability issues or like do really badly at the circuits coming up. Ferrari fans, I'm so sorry. After the start you had of this season, you probably got really confident and you probably really thought this was your season finally after such a long wait. Yeah, I'm sorry. My second race prediction was that Lewis Hamilton would finish on the podium at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and ding ding, J-Bone got that one right. J-Bone! If you told Lewis after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that he would enter the summer break with 5 straight podium finishes and back-to-back P2s, he'd have called you nuts. But here we are, and there Lewis goes, doing Lewis things. My third and final race prediction was that Kevin Magnussen would not finish in the points at the Hungarian Grand Prix in the upgraded Haas car. And remember, I only made this prediction as a reverse jinx to hopefully make the powers that be propel K-Mag into the points. And unfortunately, my reverse jinx did not work. And this prediction ended up coming true, which is not what I wanted. So I'm not giving it a ding-ding, no J-Bone. I'm not happy about this, but I did go 2 for 3 on my predictions, which is certainly an improvement on my poor showings as of late. But again, I only went 2 for 3 due to my reverse jinx not working, which feels like an L. Which is why J-Bone is 100% dedicated to going 3 for 3 with my bona fide race predictions at the Belgian Grand Prix after the summer break. J-Bone! This episode is sponsored by Bird Dogs. And for being a Formula Bone F1 show viewer and or listener, you will get a free incredible gift with your order of the best shorts, pants, and joggers on planet Earth with my code FBONE. That's FBONE on birddogs.com. I'm wearing the Bird Dogs joggers right now, and they're amazing. You hear me talk about Bird Dog shorts on here all the time, and if you still haven't tried them out yet, you're missing out big time. Bird Dogs makes the best shorts you will ever wear. I promise you. I rotate through my pairs of Bird Dogs on a weekly basis. I freaking love them. Bird Dogs are just the best shorts for any occasion. I'm wearing Bird Dog shorts all summer long because you can do anything in them. Wear them while watching Formula One, working out, playing sports, sleeping, crying about Sebastian Vettel's impending retirement, and even swimming. Bird Dog shorts are the best because they are so comfortable and because you can get them with built-in underwear that feels better on your skin than the finest silk sheets, is super breathable, and saves you from having to do more laundry. Who likes doing laundry? With built-in underwear, you do less laundry. That's science. Bird Dogs have also completely replaced my need for swim trunks because they double as swim trunks, which is one of the amazing things about them, which has saved me, again, from more laundry and has also saved me money. Now, as far as the free gift goes, it can be any number of crazy gizmos and gadgets, such as a dad hat, like the one I'm wearing right now, a tumbler, a pair of nunchucks, a whistling football, and much more. So go buy a pair of leg garments on birddogs.com and enter my code FBONE, that's FBONE at checkout, to see what that gift is. Go to birddogs.com right now, enter promo code FBONE, and they'll throw in that free gift with your order. You will not want to ever take your Bird Dogs off, I promise you. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. Next up, it is time to respond to some Hungarian Grand Prix themed voicemails left by Formula Bone F1 show listeners on the Bone Phone. If you're new to the Formula Bone F1 show, welcome. Happy to have you here. After every race this season, I do one of these race recap episodes, and a large part of them is me responding to questions, comments, hot takes, and more left by Formula Bone F1 show listeners and viewers on the Bone Phone, the number for which is 1-833-200-0966. And if you live somewhere where it's difficult to make phone calls, I've created a channel in the Formula Bone Discord server where you can submit voice memos directly from your phone rather than calling the hotline number. Check it out via the Discord invite link in the description of this episode. And also, just join the Formula Bone Discord server anyways, because it's fun even if you do not plan on sending in a Bone Phone submission. So, during or after each race, whenever you have an interesting thought, hot take, complaint, or anything else like that, make sure to hit up the Bone Phone or the Formula Bone Discord for a chance at your voicemail being played on the show. Now, without further ado, here's the first call.
Hey Jared, how's it going? It's Matthew in South of France. J-Bone! So I'm just curious if you think that George Russell had any hope at all of winning that race, or was he really, the pace really not there compared to the Red Bulls or the Ferraris? I mean, given Lewis is able to overtake Carlos, are they still got a lot of catching up to do? I would love to hear your thoughts, and love the show.
So to put it in perspective, Max and George were on almost the exact same strategy at the Hungarian Grand Prix. They both started the race on used soft tires, then switched to new mediums after 16 laps, then switched to new mediums again to finish off the race. The key differences between their races are that Max did his second pit stop 1 lap sooner than George, which Max used to successfully undercut George. Max also lost less time in the pits than George due to better pit stops, and Max also did a 360 spin at one point, which probably negated any pit stop time advantage he had achieved over George, track position aside, of course. All that combined to see Max finish the race 12.3 seconds ahead of George, despite Max starting P10 and George starting P1. So I think it's safe to say George was never going to win this race based on pace alone, and that Max simply had a faster car and better strategy on his side. However, again, Mercedes are clearly making huge progress and look like they're going to be quite competitive to close out this season and beyond. Next call.
Hey Jared, it's Leo from Miami. I was wondering what was the point of the dummy box call from Ferrari at the start of the race. The commentators were saying that he was trying to throw off George Russell, but I don't know if he immediately pitted right after, so I don't know if he actually threw them off. And yeah, that was my question. I didn't know what the point of that was and how it affected the race. Thanks so much and keep killing it, man. J-Bone!
So looking back on the whole Sainz dummy box call with the benefit of hindsight, I believe this was not a dummy team radio message. I think Sainz was simply given the order to do the opposite of whatever George did so that he would be on for either the overcut or the undercut. The call to box just meant box if George doesn't, don't if he does, and then go all out on your outlap or inlap to either undercut or overcut George. When George came in, this was Sainz's signal to stay out, have a good inlap, and go for the overcut. And Sainz's inlap was fine, and most likely good enough for him to successfully overcut George, if it were not for a bad pit stop that caused Sainz to spend too much time in the pits and eventually come out behind George. Classic Ferrari. Sainz would also eventually end up behind Leclerc after Leclerc completed his first pit stop. Man, it must be so depressing being a Ferrari driver right now. You think you get this call, you're like, okay, great, I'm going to overcut George. And then not only do you not overcut George, you end up behind the guy who was behind you. Even if it's your own teammate, it's got to sting. You know it does. Next call.
What's poppin', J-Bone? It's Master J.D. Roberts calling you from Birmingham, Alabama. I was going to ask you, what is your favorite race of the season so far?
This one's easy for me. The British Grand Prix. It truly had it all, for better and for worse, of course. Intense drama, incredible wheel-to-wheel racing, a first-time pole sitter and first-time race winner, championship fight drama, Ferrari strategy woes. What a race. That's definitely one I will be rewatching at some point. probably in the offseason when I am fiending for F1. Last call.
Hi J1, it's Ali from Saudi Arabia. Alonso shocked us all when he announced that he would be switching to Aston Martin for 2023 after signing the multi-year contract. Why do you think he's made this surprising move? J-Bone.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention 2 bits of crazy F1 news you may not have heard. The first being that Sebastian Vettel has decided to retire from Formula One at the end of this season as a 4-time champion at just 35 years old. That's 2 years younger than Lewis is right now. And by the way, Lewis showing no signs of stopping, even though he's 2 years older than Sebastian, who's retiring. Though, to be fair, Lewis is also in a far, far superior team and car situation. Sebastian Vettel is a true F1 legend and an incredible human, and he'll be deeply missed in the sport. Now, the second bit of news, which is related to that, is that earlier today, Fernando Alonso has shockingly been announced as Vettel's replacement at Aston Martin. It does seem like Alonso's been not too happy at Alpine all season long, and he got very mad at Ocon in Hungary. My guess, and this is all just speculation, I do not know, it's just my guess, is that first-year Alpine boss Otmar Szafnauer and Alonso are not getting along very well, and that may be because Otmar rates Oscar Piastri over the aging 2-time champ and sees Piastri as Alpine's long-term title hopeful, whose seat is currently being occupied by Alonso. I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm saying maybe that's what Otmar thinks, because if you're not aware, the reserve driver for Alpine is the reigning F2 champion. He's somebody a lot of people thought should have been in F1 this season because he's won the last 3 championships he's been in a row. Oscar Piastri is amazing, incredibly highly rated. And speaking of which, Alonso's departure, of course, means that there is now an open seat at Alpine that literally everyone and their mother expects to be given to Oscar Piastri, who had previously been linked with a move to Williams to replace Latifi. Now, is Latifi going to stay? Silly season is truly being silly right now, folks, so enjoy the silliness. That's it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you enjoyed the show and want to help me out, I'd really appreciate it if you could toss me a comment, like, subscription, rating, review, or any other form of engagement on whatever platform you're on right now, so that said platform and its algorithm like me more. I respond to many of the YouTube comments on my video episodes, so leave a comment and I might respond to it. Speaking of YouTube, if you join the Noti Gang by ringing that bell and turning on all Formula Bone YouTube notifications, I'd really appreciate it. Programming note: I'll be taking a break from making new episodes of the Formula Bone F1 show alongside the F1 summer break, so the next episode of the Formula Bone F1 show will be my Belgian Grand Preview episode coming out in a little over 3 weeks. In the meantime, you can stay engaged with the Formula Bone brand by joining over 500 members of the Bone Brigade in the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link in the description of this episode, and by following me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JaredBorislow. Until next time, folks, J-Bone!